Hello everyone and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. It really is a tale of two Oklahomas right now, with I-44 as the dividing line. To the east, plenty of rain, even flooding in some areas, and to the west, the extended drought. With drought in mind, the question arises, how can producers best manage their pastures as that drought lingers and the growing season really kicks in? For some answers, here's SUNUP's Curtis Hare with Dr. Brian Arnall.
Well, it's hard to believe it's already that time to start thinking about summer forage and pasture. But before we get into that, Brian, what's the soil fertility like, in regards to the wheat crop?
Yeah, so we're kind of at two stages in the state. We have the eastern half that's had a lot of really good rain and really pushing well, and all of our western half is really starting to show drought stress. The thing that's crossed both of them is nitrogen stress. A lot of people back east have had a hard time getting over their fields, getting the nitrogen on. They've been able to run the last week or so. Out west, people just pulled back and said, you know what, I don't have the soil moisture, I don't really want to invest in this crop. And waiting, and really can't blame those for waiting and not wanting to put the investment in, as we're seeing basically the crop zeroing out from the north going south. I would say this though, I don't blame them at all for not investing in nitrogen right now in the western half where it's just rain and dry. However, depending on what they want to do in the long run, it is an option if we get rain in the next week or two and we see a flush and get a good rain, is to put some nitrogen on that crop and we can still get some. So I've always said get your nitrogen on around Holliston. Well, we're past Holliston, we're past that point. But nitrogen after that point isn't a no-go, right? We can get a yield response to both biomass and grain up to flag leaf when we're deficient. And so it's one of those things, if you get moisture and you want to try to put a little on and get a little biomass for hay or get a little bit more grain, we have some time. We're just hoping, we just need that rainfall.
And for producers who aren't going to be able to make a grain crop, that nitrogen's really important if they do want to cut it and sell it for hay.
Yeah, so right now a lot of that crop is yellow. It's yellow stress, yellow for nitrogen. So if we start getting soil moisture, I would not be afraid of putting a little bit of nitrogen on, 30 to 50 pounds, to boost some of the protein in that hay crop, to get a little bit of green growing, and you'll reflush some green. You'll put on secondary and tertiary or third part tillers. You'll get a late tillering flush and you can get some more stuff going.
Yeah, hope for rain. That's been the theme for SUNUP these past few months. Shifting forward, you've been getting some calls and questions from producers about pasture management as we're heading into the summer. Last year it was kind of the same situation with drought. What are you hearing?
Right now, my push especially for the western part of the state, soil sample. Get your P and K down now, because even if it doesn't rain much, we can get that P and K in there and we can help manage the stands that we have, Bermuda grass, native, whatever. And on the nitrogen, just get 30 to 50 pounds down, unless your soil test shows that it's really high, and then you just get your phosphorus and your potassium into the soil. Shift that to eastern Oklahoma. We've got flooding down in southeast. We got a lot of rains up in the northeast. It's still not too late for P and K, but this one, we have soil moisture, we have a full profile now. We need to be thinking about how can we push this system and make good hay to help rebuild our stocks. That means we need our nitrogen out for spring green up. We're going to have growth. We need to be thinking about 2 or 3 passes. So let's fertilize, let's get a good early cutting of high quality and fertilize again. If we stay rainy in the eastern part of the state, that means we're going to leach a lot. So if we put all of our nitrogen down now, it won't be here for the later cuttings.
You mentioned soil tests, and our OSU Extension ag educators in those counties can assist with that.
Absolutely. So they have the soil probes, they have everything you need to go take that soil sample. And I've been saying this, if we think about it, I've looked at soil testing before, fertilizing pasture and fields without soil testing versus a soil sample. I can save a common producer somewhere, or make him somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 with a good soil test. And that soil test costs $10. And if you do it really, really well, it might take you an hour for that field. Most people don't take that long, but it'd take you an hour. So I ask a lot of folks, how many things on your ranch and your farm can you make $5,000 to $10,000 an hour of investment? And so that soil test is so critical. And right now, our crops are stressed last year. They're going to stress this year. We really need to focus on phosphorus and potassium management in those forage systems to make sure we can maintain those stands. OSU Extension also has this really nice pasture fertility handbook. Each of the species that we grow in Oklahoma have its own 2 pages, so you can either get the entire book or 2 pages at a time print off for just Bermuda grass or just fescue.
Alrighty, thanks, Brian. Brian Arnall, OSU Extension Soil Nutrient Specialist here at Oklahoma State University. And for a link to that handbook, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Welcome to the Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. Oklahoma, where the winds come sweeping down the plains, is not just a song, but a reality this month. Winds have been excessive lately, including Tuesday of last week, where wind gusts reached into the 40s and 50s in the west. As bad as this was, it was nowhere near the winds experienced on the last day of March, which saw wind gusts mostly in the 50s and 60s. Garfield County clocked the highest winds at 77 miles per hour. Remember that winds get rated as severe whenever they exceed 58 miles per hour. Wildfires have been common lately due to winds, along with exceptionally low humidity levels. 1 year ago, Mesonet recorded the windiest month in its nearly 30-year history, with many sites averaging 3, 4, or more miles per hour above the long-term average. Well, April 2023 has started off even windier. The red line on this graph was the smooth maximum winds from last year. This year is shown by the black line, and the blue line is the long-term average. I'm showing smooth data that shows trends instead of individual days. One huge negative to all this wind, especially in the west, is the increase in evapotranspiration, shown here to be near a ½ an inch on Tuesday. Now here's Gary with more on the western drought.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, I wish I had better news on the drought situation across the northwestern half of the state. I don't, so let's just get right to the new map and see where we're at. Well, where we're at is just in bad shape across that northwestern half of the state. Again, to the north and west of just about I-44, southwest Oklahoma up through north central Oklahoma. Just bad drought everywhere. We do have a new area of exceptional drought. That's the worst drought monitor category in far southwest Oklahoma in Harmon County. So that's an area to keep watching if they don't get rainfall soon. And then we have an expansion of that exceptional drought up into parts of northwestern and north central Oklahoma. Really running out of ways to say just how dry it is, so here's another attempt, the consecutive days with less than a quarter inch of rainfall map from the Oklahoma Mesonet. Well, I mean, we're up to just about 40 days across the state generally, but up there in the Panhandle we go from 113 days to as many as 218 days. So that dates all the way back to August 30th of 2022, and that's a long time ago, believe it or not. So just desperately need rain in that part of the state. Well, some of the impacts from this lack of rainfall, we look at the relative greenness map from the OK Fire program at the Oklahoma Mesonet. We see generally a good greenness down across the southeastern quarter of the state, the eastern third of the state. Then we see the Oklahoma wheat crop is greening up quite nicely from southwest Oklahoma up through north central Oklahoma. Oklahoma wheat belt shows up pretty good on this map. But then we see that northwestern quarter of the state and also parts of central up through northeast Oklahoma up into Osage County. Those are areas where it's just desperately non-green. We do need rainfall in these areas to green up to prevent some of those wildfire problems. Finally, the USDA's topsoil moisture percent short to very short map. We see Oklahoma at 63% short to very short. That's up 4% from last week. And we are right in line with the rest of the southern plains and New Mexico at from 65 to 75% or so. So not good news of the impacts from our drought situation. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We're joined now by Dr. Amanda Silva, our Extension Small Grain Specialist, with a wheat update. Amanda, give us an idea of what you're seeing around the state and what producers are telling you.
Sure. As we start this new plot tour season, I met with some of our county extension educators and area agronomists around the state. And the overall report of the wheat status is the lack of water, so it's being critical for our wheat. No question about it. Wheat's behind in growth, shorter in stature in some places, and in some places where the wheat was actually looking good, it may start already going backwards due to the lack of moisture. And as the wheat grows, more water is gonna need, so it's really critical.
We've talked so much about drought, and really the differences of how it's impacting the crop depend on where you are in basically the western half of the state, right?
Yes, it's so unfortunate how the western part of our state have missed all the rain. I talked to Dr. Britt Hicks, our county extension educator at Texas County, and our cooperator there, Dan Harold. We may not have a crop there at Hooker this year, so fortunate at Balco area, that Beaver County, it seems like our wheat's still kind of hanging up there. Southwest Oklahoma, we have areas also like Harmon County that we are hearing that some fields were already abandoned, but also we have some parts of the area that wheat looks good, but it needs rain. So talking with Gary Strickland, our Southwest area agronomist, he's seeing some fields already starting to turn blue. So it's really getting into that point that it's being critical.
In looking at all these areas, did planting dates or the different varieties make any difference at all in what we're seeing now?
Yes, actually, in some of the areas like Southwest, Western Oklahoma, our county extension educators reported that the late planted wheat looks better than the optimal planted wheat. We also have to remember that a lot of our wheat went in later without adequate moisture, and so we had a lot of wheat in the state that was planted later than the desired time, or it was planted in time, but the effective planting date maybe was a month or even more after the actual planting date, just due to the lack of moisture.
Are you seeing any other freeze damage?
Actually, we are not seeing much of a freeze damage other than leaf burn, so more of that cosmetic damage. So Josh Bouchon has been scouting fields in the north central Oklahoma, northwest, splitting up stems, and we are not really seeing much of a head damage. So most of the damage that we are seeing, it's cosmetic. So not a big of a concern now, but we'll keep scouting and keep looking for it.
This time of year, it's always neat to see the signs going up around the state for your variety trials. Let's talk about plot tours and field days coming up.
Yeah, so our senior agriculturalist, Tyler Lynch, is being around the state putting up the signs, so I'm sure many of the producers have seen him around. And we are very excited about this new plot tour season. So our signs are being installed in our experiments, and the schedule is already finalized and is posted on our website, and I encourage everyone to go take a look, and I look forward to seeing everyone out there.
Great. It's going to be a busy time from now till harvest for sure. Well, Amanda, thanks a lot for the update, and we'll see you again in a few weeks. And for a link to the field day and plot tour schedule, just go to sunup.okstate.edu. Dr. Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, let's kick things off looking at what the harvest delivered prices are looking like.
Well, if you look at wheat, somewhere around $8, $7.90 to $8.10. If you go to southern Oklahoma, it's around $7.70, 30 cents less. Panhandle about the same as north central Oklahoma. If you go to Cord, $5.40 and get you pretty close to what the forward contract is. If you go to the Panhandle area, it's another 70 cents. Soybeans around $12.30. Cotton, if you look at the cash, what it's telling you about cash harvest for cotton, around 79 cents. The board's around 81, 82. And for canola, probably around $6.90.
What are some of the driving forces in the market then?
Well, you got to look at what's going on in the Black Sea, especially Russia. If you look at the exports for wheat, 21% of all wheat exported around the world is Russia. Ukraine's around 6% now, Kazakhstan around 5%. That means almost a third of all exported wheat's coming through the Black Sea area. And right now, Russia is just simply unpredictable. You know, two national grain firms pulled out of Russia. They're no longer going to export Russian wheat. But the market says that gives Putin more power about controlling the wheat market because he's got control of more wheat. Other factor is weather. You always got to look at the weather. We got look at the 90-day forecast. You're looking for above average temperature and about average to below average precipitation. Not good for wheat yields, especially in the hard red winter wheat area.
For sure, and we just talked with Dr. Amanda Silva, getting an update on what's going on around Oklahoma. What are you also seeing and hearing in terms of crop condition?
Well, the USDA released the first crop condition report for 2023. You look at winter wheat, it's the worst it's been since 1996. The good to excellent is 28%. Last year it was 30%. November is 34%. And remember, it was relatively bad last year. You look at poor to very poor, 36%. Same as last year, 26% in November, so it's gotten worse. But Kansas and Oklahoma and your hard red winter wheat area, crop conditions are worse than your, say, soft red winter wheat. And on the market, about 67% of your winter wheat's hard red, and about 25 is soft reds. And in Kansas, 16% good to excellent, 57% poor to very poor. Oklahoma, 26 and 40. So our crop conditions are worse than last year. And you remember last year, Oklahoma only harvested 73 million bushels.
With that in mind, what kind of advice do you have for growers?
Right now, growers can't do anything. Now they can watch for armyworms, they can watch for diseases, they got to manage and protect what yield they can get out of this market. From a price standpoint, given what's going on in the Black Sea area, I think it's just a wait and see situation. Prices, I think there's more upside potential than downside risk. I think Putin's going to do what he can to maintain relatively high prices so that he can get more money coming into his economy, which he needs. I think it's his time to sit on the sidelines and watch what's going on.
All right, Kim, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
Good morning, Oklahoma. I'm Mark Johnson, and thanks for joining us on Cow-Calf Corner. This week's topic is fertilizer at half price. Now, in a time of drought and inflation and higher input costs in production agriculture than we've maybe ever seen before, it was a pleasant surprise last week when I checked the cost of urea fertilizer and found out that it was about 43% of what it was a year ago right now. Now, we're still talking about prices at $450 to $500 a ton, but as compared to where we were last spring, this looks a lot more feasible. Why are we talking about this? Well, following up on last week's topic, we know that if we've got improved grass pastures, something like Bermuda grass, Plains blue stem, in order to maximize the productivity of those, long-term to keep everything healthy, soil, plants, tonnage of beef that comes off that pasture land per acre, those type of improved grasses require nitrogen fertilizer for the sake of maximum productivity. So we've got a linear relationship between the amount of nitrogen fertilizer that gets applied to the production of Bermuda grass. We've got the same kind of relationship to a lesser degree as we think about Plains blue stem. And so while times have been tough, I encourage producers to evaluate how much forage you're going to need this year. Take inventory of your cows, whatever calves or different ages of cattle you're going to be grazing. Think about the amount of forage that you need to produce. study those tables that relate nitrogen fertilizer application to the amount of tonnage of forage dry matter we're going to produce from improved grasses, and take that into account now. Again, as we discussed last week, my belief is this spring it's going to be important to get that nitrogen fertilizer down early or at the right time. If we're thinking about Bermuda grass stands that may have a little cool season grass mixed in with them, it's going to take an extra level of management on those to make sure we get our nitrogen down at the right time to optimize the growth of that Bermuda grass. But we're going to have to apply that fertilizer in order to produce the tonnage of forage that we need. We've got to do this for the sake of desirable plant species. If we under-fertilize or cut back on fertilizer this year, the repercussions are less desirable plants growing, probably more undesirables, things like weeds creeping into our stand, brown, bare soil without any grass cover. So the importance of fertilizer is critical. Also take into account, we're addressing nitrogen fertilizer, but take a look at your phosphorus and potassium levels through a soil test. We're going to need to mix those into fertilizer applications as well. If our soil test indicates that we need to do so, that's also going to be critical to maximizing the productivity of those improved grass pastures. I hope this helps, and as always, thanks for being with us.
With the recent wildfires and the Oklahoma storm season officially here, we want to remind you of our emergency and disaster preparedness page on our OSU Extension website. Here you can find tips and tricks to help better prepare your land, crops and livestock, and your family in case an emergency ever comes to your door. Whether it's tornadoes, drought, flooding, or wildfires, being prepared can make all the difference. We also have materials for natural disaster recovery for those affected by these events. To get you and your family prepared and ready, just visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Finally, today we meet another champion of OSU Agriculture, Dr. Carl Whitcomb. Video production manager Craig Woods put together this story.
When Carl Whitcomb started experimenting at the OSU Ag Research Station just west of campus, he didn't have much to work with.
When I arrived here in August of ~72, there was the old barn that still exists with a leaky roof. There was no water, there was no bathroom, it was just, and no electrical power even. And so we had to build upon that.
Growing up on a farm in southeast Kansas, he learned two skills: how to grow plants and build things.
As a kid growing up on a farm, we'd get a Sears catalog in the mail. I didn't have those toys. I built toys that looked just like that.
Carl received his bachelor's degree at Kansas State and graduate degrees from Iowa State. Together with the station superintendent, Charlie Gray, Dr. Whitcomb began experimenting with propagating plants.
In teaching classes, I would have the students meet out at that old research lab, and we would conduct experiments. So they learned about scientific methods and all these techniques and so forth as part of the lab, but it also helped me with the research side of things.
Randy Davis, president and CEO of Greenleaf Nurseries, was one of his students.
When I first graduated from college, I didn't really realize all the things that I learned when I was at Oklahoma State University, or even absorbed all the things that I absorbed while I was there, like some of these things that he taught us. But as I got a little bit older and a little bit wiser, then I started to realize, oh man, that was really good stuff that he was showing us and teaching us. And that's really what I go back to, is him pushing that envelope is really what has helped me be successful and helped other people be successful, and it's helped this company be successful.
Dr. Whitcomb, when he was on the faculty, really was an innovator, and that aspect of his nature really has carried throughout his career.
Dr. Whitcomb left the department in 1985 to start his own company, Lacebark Incorporated. In the 40 years since, his research has led to several new species of plants, 44 U.S. patents, and more than 30 trademarks. He's also published papers in several hundred journal and technical publications and received numerous industry awards.
Carl was kind of a pioneer in that. He started developing new plants kind of before it was the thing to do in our industry. And so we grew a lot of his plants and helped get them out into the marketplace.
Among his proudest accomplishments are a micronutrient fertilizer and a pot that keeps plants from being root-bound. But homeowners and landscape professionals will recognize his name from his plant collection.
This is part of 65 acres that I call my fun location.
His crepe myrtles in particular can be found worldwide. Patented nearly 20 years ago, Double Dynamite was the first true red crepe myrtle, something many said was impossible.
I saw that challenge of that there'll never be a red flowered crepe myrtle as being, I think I can beat that. It took me 9 years, but Dynamite crepe myrtle is known worldwide.
The old barn where it all began still stands, now with power and water, and is a few steps away from the Botanic Garden. Dr. Whitcomb's creations have come full circle.
He's been very supportive of what's going on at OSU even today with his support for scholarships, student scholarships. He's made some significant investments at the Botanic Garden to help make sure that we have the facilities that we need to keep it strong. And he's also just been a great resource for ideas.
Celebrating Carl Whitcomb, 2022 champion for OSU Agriculture.
To learn more about Dr. Whitcomb and the other honorees, just go to sunup.okstate.edu. And that'll do it for our show this week. We'll see you next week at SUNUP.